All right, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into a world that you might only know from those kind of flashy headlines.
Yeah.
The dark side of Counter-Strike skins.
Hmm.
We're talking skin gambling and how it's reeling in young players,
Right.
often without them even realizing the risk.
What's really alarming is this isn't just about kids, making a few bad bets.
Right.
This is a multi-million-dollar industry
Yeah.
with, sophisticated casinos operating online,
Yep.
often using loopholes to target an audience that frankly shouldn't even be gambling in the first place.
Exactly. We're talking about these virtual items.
Right.
Skins that you can win in Counter-Strike.
Uh-huh.
They change the look of your weapons in the game. Now, normally you get them through loot boxes, kind of like those random prize boxes you see in games.
Yeah.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
These loot boxes work like slot machines,
Yeah.
with random chances of getting rare, valuable skins.
Mm-hmm.
And those skins, well, they can be traded for cash on the Steam Marketplace.
And that's where the trouble starts.
Yeah.
Because now you've got a system where kids can essentially gamble with real-world value,
Right.
even if they're using their parents' credit cards to buy those loot boxes in the first place.
Yeah, we've heard stories from parents who had no clue their kids were racking up hundreds, even thousands of dollars on these loot boxes.
Oh, wow.
All in the hopes of getting a skin they could sell or use to gamble on even riskier sites.
And these are just like isolated incidents.
Right.
A YouTuber named Jeff, who has been investigating this for a while, did a survey,
Okay.
found that a shocking 70% of people who gamble on CSGO skins started doing it before they were even legally allowed to gamble.
Think about that for a second. 70%.
Yeah,
It's one thing to picture a teenager sneaking into a casino,
right.
but here it's happening right under the noses of parents.
Exactly.
And often on platforms they think are perfectly safe.
What makes it even more insidious is the accessibility.
Okay.
Unlike a real casino, these online skin gambling sites often have minimal age verification.
Right.
You might have to click a box that says you're over 18.
Right.
But that's about it. It's like the Wild West out there.
So we've got kids, many of them underage, gambling with virtual items that have real-world value, all on platforms with practically no oversight.
Right.
Now, you might be wondering, how do these casinos even work?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's not like they're taking actual cash.
Well, not directly.
Okay.
What happens is they create these elaborate systems where you deposit skins,
Uh-huh.
and those skins are assigned a value based on their market price.
Okay.
Then you can use that value to bet on things like roulette slots, even esports matches.
So it's like they've created their own currency
Right?
using these skins and then built an entire gambling ecosystem around it.
Exactly.
But how do they get away with this? Aren't there laws against online gambling?
There are, but that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
These casinos operate in a legal gray area,
Okay.
often setting up shop in countries with lax gambling regulations.
Right.
And they've gotten really creative with their loopholes.
Give us an example. How does one of these loopholes actually work?
Take CSGO Lotto, for instance. They tried to claim they weren't a casino, but a sweepstakes website.
Okay.
Basically, they argued that since you could technically get a free entry, it wasn't gambling.
Oh.
It's like saying, well, you could win a free car at the mall, so that's not gambling either.
Right.
Of course, the reality is almost everyone was depositing skins to play, making it gambling in all but name.
It's almost insulting how transparent some of these tactics are, right? Like
Yeah.
they think they could just slap a different label on it and everyone will magically believe they're not running a casino.
Exactly. And then you have sites like HypeDrop,
Okay.
who use this money-back guarantee as a selling point.
Okay.
They have a convoluted loyalty program where, theoretically, you could eventually earn back any losses through points.
Right.
But in reality, it's incredibly difficult to actually cash out those points, and most people end up losing far more than they ever earn back.
It's all smoke and mirrors designed to lure in unsuspecting players,
Yeah.
especially young ones who might not fully grasp the implications of what they're getting into.
And this lack of regulation creates a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Because there's essentially no incentive for these casinos to implement any sort of responsible gambling measures.
Right.
No age verification, no spending limits, nothing.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
We know underage gambling is a huge problem, and yet these sites are practically throwing their doors open to anyone with a Steam account and a few skins to spare.
And the truly scary part,
Yeah.
we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, wow.
The reach of this industry goes far beyond just the casinos themselves.
Okay.
We need to talk about the role of influencers, the money they make, and how they're fueling this whole operation.
Okay, so we're diving even deeper into this rabbit hole. But before we get to the influencers, let's take a quick step back and look at just how big this problem really is. I mean, we've thrown around some numbers, but what are we talking about in terms of the scale of this industry?
Well, according to Jeff's research, some of these casinos are seeing more traffic than major online gambling sites.
Wow.
We're talking millions of visitors every month.
Okay.
And while it's hard to get exact figures, it's estimated that these sites could be making tens of millions of dollars every month.
Tens of millions?
Yeah.
Wow. And to think this is all happening in the shadows, largely unregulated and fueled by the allure of these virtual items?
And that brings us back to the influencers.
Right.
Because they're the ones who bridge the gap between these shadowy casinos and a young, impressionable audience.
Yeah.
Think about it. You're 13 years old,
Yeah.
watching your favorite streamer unbox a rare skin worth hundreds of dollars.
Right.
Then turn around and gamble it on some website with flashing lights and promises of easy money.
Yeah.
It's incredibly enticing.
Yeah.
Especially for a young audience that might not fully grasp the risks involved.
And it's not like these influencers are hiding their involvement.
Right.
You see sponsored streams,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube videos, even social media posts promoting these sites.
Right.
It's become so normalized that many young viewers might not even realize it's gambling they're watching.
And these sponsorships are lucrative.
Yeah.
We're talking thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars a month
Wow.
for some of these top influencers.
Right.
Jeff actually dug into some leaked contracts.
Oh, wow.
And one site was offering a popular streamer over $300,000 a month just to feature their site on stream.
$300,000 a month.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's crazy.
No wonder so many streamers are jumping on this bandwagon, even if it means promoting something that could be harmful to their viewers.
Jeff's research suggests that a staggering 75% of CSGO streamers have some sort of sponsorship deal with a gambling site.
Yeah.
It's become so pervasive that it's almost impossible to avoid.
Okay, so we've got the casinos often operating in legal gray areas, and we've got the influencers raking in huge sums of money to promote them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bleak picture so far. But what about the game developers, Valve?
Mm-hmm.
They created Counter-Strike and the Steam marketplace where these skins are traded.
Right.
Surely they have some responsibility here, right?
Absolutely. Valve is in a very conflicted position.
Yeah.
On one hand, they profit immensely from this whole ecosystem.
Right.
They make money every time someone buys a loot box, and they take a cut of every skin traded on the Steam marketplace.
But on the other hand, they claim to be against gambling, and they've even sent out cease and desist letters to some of these sites in the past. It seems like they want to have their cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those cease and desist letters haven't really been effective.
Right.
Many of those sites are still operating today. The question is, does Valve actually want to shut them down? Or are they content to turn a blind eye as long as the money keeps flowing?
Well, if they really wanted to, they could make it much harder for these sites to operate.
Yeah.
They control the entire ecosystem. They could restrict skin trading, implement stricter age verification measures, or even work with authorities to crack down on these offshore casinos.
They've shown they can act swiftly when they feel the pressure.
Yeah.
Remember the controversy surrounding the PGL Major, a huge CSGO tournament,
Right.
and their sponsorship deal with HypeDrop? Valve quickly stepped in and changed how trade data was tracked, making it more difficult for sites like HypeDrop to operate.
So they clearly have the power to influence this market.
Right.
But when it comes to skin gambling as a whole, they've been strangely hesitant to take decisive action.
And some people argue that's because they benefit financially from the status quo.
Right.
It's a bit like the pachinko loophole in Japan.
Okay.
Pachinko is a type of gambling game that's technically illegal,
Yeah.
but there's a loophole that allows parlors to operate and generate massive profits.
Okay.
And because these parlors generate so much revenue,
Right.
there's little political will to close the loophole.
So basically, some people think Valve is turning a blind eye to skin gambling because it's profitable for them,
Right.
even if it means underage kids are getting hooked on gambling.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And the Washington State Gambling Commission,
Okay.
where Valve is headquartered,
Right.
actually concluded that Valve knowingly facilitates illegal skin wagering.
Wow. That's pretty damning.
Yeah.
And yet, no significant action has been taken against them. It feels like they're untouchable.
It's a complex situation with a lot of money and powerful interests at play.
Right.
But the bottom line is Valve has a responsibility to protect its users,
Yeah.
especially young ones. They can't just keep profiting from the system while pretending they have no control over it.
So we've got these shady casinos influencers making a fortune promoting them,
Right.
and Valve seemingly unwilling to take meaningful action. It's a pretty grim picture so far. But what about the esports scene? You mentioned earlier that even professional teams are getting entangled in this web of gambling sponsorships.
Right. Top teams like FaZe G2, even major tournaments like the PGL Major have all had ties to skin gambling sites.
Wow.
It's become so ingrained in the CSGO esports ecosystem that some team owners argue that they can't compete without accepting this money.
But doesn't that create a moral conflict?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about organizations that rely on young fans and aspiring players, yet they're accepting money from companies that are essentially profiting from underage gambling.
It's a huge ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
And the lines get blurred even further when you see teams like G2 partnering with a site like CSGO Roll, which claims to be 18 plus,
Right.
but then features their star player who just turned 18 in their promotional materials.
Right.
It sends a very mixed message to young fans.
It seems like everyone involved is trying to justify their actions.
Right.
Passing the buck and pointing fingers at someone else.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's the young players who are getting hurt.
Right.
They're the ones who are getting hooked on gambling, often with their parents' money. And they're the ones who are facing the consequences.
And that brings us to a crucial question. What can be done to stop this?
Yeah.
Is there any hope for a solution? Or are we just stuck in this vicious cycle?
It feels like, we've uncovered this massive problem.
Yeah.
This dark underbelly of the game we love. But where do we go from here?
Right.
What can actually be done to protect these kids and break this cycle?
Well, it's not going to be easy. There's no magic bullet here.
Right.
But I think the first step is acknowledging the severity of the problem. We can't keep treating skin gambling as some harmless side effect of the gaming industry.
Yeah.
This is real gambling with real consequences, and it's affecting a vulnerable population.
So we just need to ban all skin gambling sites. Is that even realistic?
It's complicated. Outright bans can be difficult to enforce, especially with sites operating in different jurisdictions. But that doesn't mean we should just throw our hands up in defeat. There are things we can do.
Like what are some concrete steps that could be taken?
Well, for starters, we need much stricter regulations. Governments need to step up and create clear laws specifically addressing skin gambling.
Yeah.
We need robust age verification systems, not just a checkbox that any kid can click. We need spending limits and mechanisms for reporting and addressing predatory practices.
And it can't just be about punishing the casinos.
Right.
We need to address the demand side of the equation too, right?
Absolutely. Education is key. We need to have open and honest conversations about gambling, its risks, and the potential for addiction.
All right.
This needs to happen in schools and homes and across the gaming community. Parents need to be aware of what their kids are doing online.
Right.
And young people need to be equipped with the knowledge and critical thinking skills to make informed decisions.
It's like we need a culture shift
Yeah.
where we stop glamorizing gambling and start treating it with the seriousness it deserves.
Exactly. And that's where influencers have a huge role to play. They have a platform, they have an audience, and they have a responsibility.
Yeah.
They need to think critically about the content they're creating and the messages they're sending.
So instead of promoting sites that prey on young people,
Right.
maybe they could use their influence to educate their viewers about the risks of gambling.
Right. And they could also put pressure on Valve to take more responsibility.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, Valve holds a lot of the cards here. They have the power to implement many of the changes we've been discussing.
They could make it much harder for these sites to operate.
Yeah.
They could restrict skin trading, enforce stricter age verification, even work with authorities to crack down on these offshore casinos.
And it's not just about legal action. They could also implement features that promote responsible gaming, like spending limits, timeouts, and resources for players who might be struggling with addiction.
But so far, they've been pretty resistant to taking any meaningful action. It feels like they're more concerned with protecting their profits than protecting their players.
And that's where consumers come in.
Right.
We need to hold them accountable. We need to demand better. We need to let them know that we're not okay with them profiting from a system that's harming young people.
We can vote with our wallets. We can speak out on social media. We can contact our elected officials. We need to make it clear that this is an issue we care about and that we won't stay silent.
This isn't just about Counter-Strike, and it's not just about skin gambling. This is about the future of gaming and the well-being of a generation growing up in a digital world where the lines between gaming and gambling are becoming increasingly blurred.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the dark side of CS skins, we leave you with this. What role will you play in creating a safer and more responsible gaming environment? The choice is yours.